If you've ever had an HOA president who treats your mailbox like their personal ATM, who measures your grass with a ruler and your patience with a stopwatch, go ahead and smash that like button. Because this isn't just a story about a ridiculous fine or a petty dispute. This is a masterclass in what happens when unchecked, small pond power collides with a big ocean predator. Stick around, this little morning adventure ends in multiple felony charges, a viral clip that will live in internet infamy, and one very, very red-faced neighborhood council that learned a permanent lesson about who they chose to lead them. It was 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday, the sun just peeking through the blinds, casting long, lazy stripes across the hardwood floor, when the pounding started. It wasn't a polite knock, not the kind a neighbor makes when they need to borrow a cup of sugar. This was a flat-palmed, insistent, percussive assault on my front door, the kind of knocking that vibrates through the walls and into your teeth. For a split second, a ghost of my professional life flickered through my mind. Raid? Asset in trouble? But that life was supposed to be on hold, locked away with my service weapon. I was on a mandatory 6-month leave, a cool-down period after a particularly nasty case in Brussels that involved an arms dealer, a compromised embassy, and a lot of shattered glass. This house, this quiet suburban street, was meant to be my sanctuary. A place to forget. I swung my legs out of bed, the floorboards cool under my feet. The pounding came again, louder this time, rattling the frame. I glanced at the security monitor next to my bed, a professional habit I couldn't shake. The feed showed 2 men on my porch. They wore cheap, sweat-stained polo shirts in a truly unfortunate shade of beige. On the left breast of each shirt was a clumsily embroidered patch. Their badges, hanging from lanyards around their necks, looked like they came from the toy aisle of a discount store. One was tall and twitchy, constantly shifting his weight from foot to foot. The other was shorter, built like a fire hydrant, and wearing a pair of mirrored sunglasses that were deeply out of place in the gentle morning light. "Open up." Oakmere Heights Public Safety, one of them barked, his voice muffled by the thick oak door. The words echoed in the quiet air, absurd and theatrical. I had read the HOA bylaws, all 112 pages of them. There was no public safety unit. There was a committee for landscaping and another for holiday decorations, but nothing that empowered 2 goons to play cops on my doorstep. When I finally opened the door, a gust of pre-caffeinated irritation blowing through me, they puffed out their chests. The twitchy one spoke, trying to project an authority his Kmart uniform couldn't possibly grant him. "You have 5 minutes to vacate your own property." He let that hang in the air, as if it were a perfectly reasonable request. They said they were the HOA police. Cute. Incredibly, stupendously cute. They had made a critical, career-ending error. They had missed the small print buried under the freshly laid sod and the meticulously manicured hedges of Oakmere Heights: "You don't cuff Special Agent Malcolm Harding without a federal warrant." Ever. I'd been a resident of Oakmere Heights for maybe 90 days. 3 months. That's it. My relocation here wasn't by choice, not really. It was a directive from the Bureau's psychiatrist, a man with kind eyes and a firm belief that exposure to normalcy could sand down the jagged edges of a career spent in the shadows. "Go somewhere quiet, Malcolm," he'd said. "Fix a car. Grill some steak. Mow a lawn. Reacquaint yourself with a world where the stakes aren't life and death." Oakmere Heights, with its rows of identical houses, looked like the dictionary definition of quiet. It was a sea of beige siding, perfectly aligned mailboxes, and matching lawns that looked like they were cut with scissors. The souls seemed to match, too, placid, orderly, and content within their covenant-controlled bubble. For the first 2 months, I did exactly as the doctor ordered. I kept my head down. My primary project was a beautiful, neglected 1970 Chevelle SS that I'd found rusting in a barn upstate. The engine was a mess, the interior was shot, but the bones were good. It became my therapy. I'd spend hours in the garage, the scent of grease and steel a welcome replacement for the sterile smell of interrogation rooms. I'd turn wrenches, meticulously clean parts, and feel the solid, tangible progress under my hands. At night, I'd sit on the back patio, flipping the occasional steak, a cold beer sweating on the table beside me, and listen to the crickets. It was peaceful. It was boring. It was perfect. Then, into this tranquil scene, cruised Mrs. Constance Whitaker. She entered my life not with a friendly hello or a welcome to the neighborhood casserole, but behind the wheel of a pearl-white Lexus RX that she drove with the grim purpose of a U-boat captain. Constance, or Connie as she insisted everyone call her, was the HOA president, a position she wielded not as a public service but as a personal fiefdom. She was a woman in her late 50s with a helmet of perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a wardrobe of pastel pantsuits, and an expression of perpetual disappointment. Her patrols were legendary. She'd cruise the neighborhood at a stately 5 miles per hour, her Lexus purring down the pristine asphalt, while she photographed perceived infractions with the intensity of a war crimes investigator. A gnome slightly askew on a lawn. A basketball hoop left out past dusk. Dandelions were treated like an invading army. My first official notice of violation was a masterwork of pettiness. The offense? My city-issued trash can was, according to her time-stamped photo, still visible from the street at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. The pickup had been at 9 a.m. sharp. I was in violation of Bylaw 17, Section C, Subsection 2, all refuse receptacles must be removed from public view no later than 30 minutes following municipal collection. The fine was $40. I remember looking at the notice, a professionally printed slip of paper that had been tucked under my windshield wiper, and laughing out loud. In my other life, I was dealing with men who laundered millions for cartels. Here, the reigning terror was a woman incensed by the temporal location of a garbage can. I paid it. It wasn't worth the fight. I had bigger fish to fry, or in this case, a carburetor to rebuild. The second fine came a week later. The lawn. I had mowed it on a Sunday afternoon, but apparently, my lines weren't perfectly parallel to the curb. Furthermore, the grass in a small patch near the driveway was, and I quote, displaying a height inconsistent with the community standard of 2.5 inches. This time, the fine was $60, with a handwritten note at the bottom, a list of approved landscaping services is available upon request. CW. I paid that one too, but the amusement was beginning to curdle into annoyance. Then came the flag. My parents were both cops. My father served 30 years with the NYPD, my mother 25. They were good, honest people who believed in the line between order and chaos. They were gone now, but their memory was a cornerstone of my identity. I installed a small, tasteful thin blue line flag on a pole next to my garage. It wasn't massive or ostentatious. It was a quiet tribute. Less than 24 hours later, another slip was taped to my front door. This time, the violation was for unapproved political signage, citing a bylaw that was so vaguely worded it could apply to a for sale sign or a child's birthday banner. The fine was $100. That's when my patience officially ran out. This wasn't about bylaws anymore, it was a power trip. I took the notice, laughed, folded it into a neat square, and taped it to the inside of my garage window, right next to the flag. That's when the letters got spicy. They stopped being official notices and became personal, typed screed signed by Connie. The salutations devolved from Dear Resident to Mr. Harding, and finally to Mr. Harding, if that's even your real name. The tone shifted from bureaucratic to accusatory. She hinted that she was running a background check on me. She questioned what a single man in his 40s was doing in a family-oriented community. She implied I was hiding something. One letter ended with the line, "People who have nothing to hide don't hide, Mr. Harding. We are a community of open doors and open books. You, sir, are a closed chapter, and we will find a way to read it. Spoiler alert, Connie, it is my real name. It's right there on the bureau credentials tucked safely in my wallet, the ones that could make your little world of manicured lawns and pastel pantsuits implode. Section 2, Saturday's Knock. The Saturday morning that would become neighborhood legend started with the buzz of my phone on the nightstand. My personal cell. I glanced at the caller ID, unknown. In my line of work, unknown calls at 6:29 a.m. are never good news. My mind, still foggy with sleep, cycled through the possibilities. A protected witness with cold feet. A confidential informant in a jam. A wrong number. I let it ring twice, then a third time, before it clicked over to voicemail. A 30-second pause followed, just long enough for me to think it was over. Then, boom boom boom. The thunderous assault on my front door began. After seeing the two cosplayers on my security monitor, I pulled on a pair of old Howard University sweats and a faded t-shirt. I didn't bother with shoes. I wanted the entire interaction to scream, unimpressed homeowner, not federal agent about to dismantle your entire life. I opened the door a few inches, leaving the security chain engaged. Morning, I said, my voice intentionally low and gravelly with sleep. The two men were a study in contrasts. The tall one, twitchy, had the nervous, darting eyes of a man who'd had too much caffeine and not enough solid life choices. The shorter one stood with his arms crossed, his mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes but reflecting a distorted, fisheye version of me and my house. The patch on their shirts read, Oakmere Heights Public Safety Unit. It was poorly stitched, the letters slightly crooked. I'd read the bylaws cover to cover during my first week, a habit from my threat assessment days. I knew for a fact no such entity existed. The HOA had an architectural review committee and a social committee, but no public safety unit. Malcolm Harding? Twitchy asked, trying to sound official. He was holding a cheap clipboard with a single sheet of paper on it. Depends who's asking, I replied, leaning against the door jamb. He puffed up his chest. I'm Officer Miller, and this is Officer Schmidt, he said, gesturing to mirror shades. We're with the Oakmere Heights Public Safety Unit. You've been served multiple notices for covenant violations and have failed to pay the associated fines. You are also displaying unauthorized signage. We're here to place you under arrest for repeated covenant violations and resisting fines. As he said the word, arrest, he reached behind his back and whipped out a pair of black plastic zip cuffs, brandishing them like a magician with a bad deck of cards. Mirror Shades, aka Schmidt, chimed in, his voice a low monotone. We're going to need you to step outside and turn around, sir. I almost laughed. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. Arrest? With zip cuffs? For a flag? I decided to play along, to see just how deep this particular rabbit hole went. Arrest, you say? That's a strong word. I'm going to need to see some identification, please. A real badge, issued by a state or federal authority. Twitchy, or Miller, flashed a laminated card so quickly it was a blur of plastic and bad clip art. But my eyes are trained to catch details in milliseconds. I caught the typo. Big, bold letters at the top, Oakmere Heights Public Safety. Public. Not public. They couldn't even spell check their fake IDs. That's not a real ID, and you're not real officers, I said, my tone shifting from sleepy homeowner to something much colder. You're impersonating peace officers, which is a felony in the state of Georgia. Mirror Shades took a half step forward, trying to use his bulk to intimidate. Sir, we're trying to do this the easy way. I held up both my palms in a universal gesture of placation, even though I was the furthest thing from placated. All right, look. Let's all take a breath. Give me 30 seconds. Before they could object, I closed the door, leaving the chain on, and walked calmly to the small table in my entryway where my keys and wallet sat. I didn't just grab the wallet. I took a moment. I let my thumb trace the outline of the leather holder, the familiar weight of the metal shield inside. This was the part of my life I had tried to leave behind, the authority I was supposed to be taking a break from. But they had brought their fantasy world to my doorstep. It was time to introduce them to reality. I took a deep, steadying breath, slid the security chain off, and reopened the door. I stepped back onto the porch, the cool morning air a stark contrast to the rapidly heating situation. The wallet felt heavy in my hand. Miller and Schmidt were standing exactly where I left them, though their posture had changed. They were rigid now, uncertain. My brief, calm retreat had thrown their script off balance. They were expecting fear or anger, not quiet compliance followed by a deliberate return. "All right, gentlemen," I said, my voice back to a conversational level. "You wanted to see some ID. I think that's only fair." I didn't flip the wallet open with a dramatic flourish. I just opened it, smooth and practiced, and held it out. The gold shield, the one with the eagle and the scales of justice, winked in the early morning sunrise. The light caught the deep blue enamel letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent. Special Agent Malcolm Harding, FBI, I stated, letting the words settle into the space between us. The effect was instantaneous and profound. 3 full beats of silence passed, a void so complete that the chirping of crickets in a nearby bush could have carried a tune. Twitchy's face went through a rapid, fascinating series of micro-expressions. First came a hiccup of confusion, then a wave of heartburn-induced panic, and finally, the pale, slack-jawed look of a man contemplating his own imminent demise. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty gray. His Adam's apple bobbed convulsively. Mirror Shades, for his part, slowly lowered the shoulder radio he'd been clutching, as if it had suddenly burst into flames. His body, previously coiled with counterfeit authority, seemed to deflate. I let the silence stretch for another few seconds, giving them plenty of time to appreciate the magnitude of their mistake. Then, I lowered my voice to the register I reserve for suspects in small, windowless rooms, the voice that's not a yell, but is somehow much, much louder. The voice that makes them rethink every choice they've ever made. "Names," I said, my gaze locked on Twitchy. "Your real names. The security company you actually work for. And the direct number for your watch commander. You will give them to me now." Just then, a curtain twitched in the house across the street. A side door creaked open 2 houses down. The neighborhood was waking up, drawn by the strange tableau on my porch. From the corner of my eye, I saw a figure in pajamas on a second-story balcony, phone already held aloft. "Get this. World star," he yelled with the misplaced enthusiasm of someone who thinks they're witnessing a prank, not the commission of several felonies. It was 2025, but the cry was pure 2012. Mirror Shades, whose real name I would soon learn was Barry, made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Sir," he stammered, his tough guy act completely shattered. This is a civil matter. It's just HOA business." I cut him off, my voice like a razor. "Barry, let me educate you. Georgia Statute October 16, 23, impersonating a public officer or employee. That's a felony. You attempted to place me under arrest, which means we can add Georgia Statute May 16, 41, false imprisonment. Given that you were brandishing restraints and demanding I leave my property, a good prosecutor might even make a run at May 16, 40, kidnapping. So, tell me again how this is a civil matter." As I spoke, Twitchy, real name, Kevin, let the plastic zip cuffs fall from his trembling hand. They hit the concrete porch with a clatter that sounded as loud as a gunshot in the morning quiet. He looked at them on the ground as if they were venomous snakes. The game was over. They knew it. And I was just getting started. I've spent the better part of 2 decades hunting monsters. I've tracked arms dealers on 3 continents, sat across from sociopaths in sterile rooms and talked them into confessing, and convinced militia accountants to sing over lukewarm coffee in dusty roadside diners. I have looked genuine evil in the eye. But in all my years, nothing has been quite as bizarre, or in its own way, as illuminating, as the saga of a suburban HOA queen who hired fake cops because my lawn edges were a quarter-inch too crooked for her liking. It's a lesson in the nature of power. The men I hunt crave power on a global scale, power over markets, governments, and lives. Connie Whitaker craved power on a microscopic scale, power over her neighbors' trash cans, their rose bushes, and their choice of front door paint. But the source is the same, a deep-seated arrogance, a core belief that the rules that apply to everyone else do not apply to them. They believe their will is paramount. Authority isn't a patch on your shirt or the title on a business card. I've seen men with real badges who had no authority and street kids with no titles who commanded absolute loyalty. True authority comes from the weight of your word, your integrity, and your actions when no one is filming. It's about a quiet, unshakable competence. And when pure, unearned arrogance meets that quiet weight, well, that's when the cuffs click for real, whether it's in a foreign capital or on a manicured lawn in suburban Georgia. Conclusion, final CTA. Like this video if you believe that badges will always beat clipboards in the end. Subscribe to the channel, because I'm just getting started. New stories are coming every week where competence wins, arrogance loses, and the good guys, even the grumpy ones on forced leave, come out on top. And seriously, drop your most nightmarish HOA story below. I can't wait to read them. You have no idea.